Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm so excited to be filming this video just because in today's video I'm going to teach you guys how to make a Victorian corset. I already have a playlist where I have a couple of videos where I show you guys how to make different types of corsets. If you haven't seen the videos in that playlist, the link will be in the description. The link will be in the description box down below. I don't know why I'm stammering. Anyway, if you want to see how we draft, cut and sew a Victorian corset, keep on watching.
Oh, hey, I didn't see you there.
So I took my pattern paper and I'm drawing a baseline from the top of the paper. That's about ½ inch from the top. And from that point, I'm marking my bust point 11 inches, under bust 14 inches, waistline 18 inches, and length of the blouse 22 inches. I also added extra 1 inch for allowance. And I'm just extending those lines. This is actually my vertical measurements. So all you have to do is go ahead and measure your own vertical measurements. Bust point, which is distance from shoulder to nipple. Under bust, which is distance from shoulder to under the bust. Waistline, which is 3 inches after your under bust, and then the length that you want your blouse to be. I also went ahead to just label all the lines. FL means full length and AL means allowance. Now I'm just cutting out the excess paper. The next thing I'm doing is from the baseline, I'm marking 9 inches downwards, which is going to serve as my armhole line. And I'm just extending that line. And now I divided my shoulder measurement by 2 and I added 1.5 inches allowance. My shoulder measurement is 15 inches divided by 2, that's 7.5, and then plus 1.5 inch allowance. And that's what I drew. That's the line I drew. And then I drew a curve from that armhole line to meet that shoulder line. Now from the bust point line, I went up by 1 inch and I marked that point. So now from the fold, remember that my paper is actually on fold. So from the fold, I marked 4 inches, which is half of the nipple to nipple measurement. So the nipple to nipple measurement is 8 inches divided by 2, that's 4 inches. So that's what I marked. I want to have a low neckline, so I came down from that line I initially marked by 1/4 of an inch, and then I created a sweetheart neckline. So disclaimer, if you don't want your neckline to be this low, please, this is the time to measure from the baseline how low you want your neckline to be, and then just trim along the line you decide to have. Now to create my first dart, I'm going to go in by 1 inch on both sides along that nipple to nipple line. So I'm also repeating that on the under bust line, the waistline, but at the full length line I actually went in by ½ inch on both sides. Okay, at the top I also went in by 1 inch on both sides. Okay, now I'm going to use my ruler to just create the curve for the center piece and the side piece, and also create my dart. So just watch and see how I do it. Now I'm just dividing my bust measurement by 4. I'm placing that at the top, and then that's from the fold. I'm placing it at the top from the fold. I'm just marking that point, and then I'm adding an extra 2 inches allowance. Now I'm also going to add another 1.5 inches allowance, and that's because of that dart that I took and I shaded. You can see the portion that I shaded. Yes, so that 1.5 inches I marked is just to replace that part that I shaded. Now at the under bust, I'm dividing my shape by 4. I'm also adding 2 inches allowance and also another 1.5 inches allowance, also to make up for that shaded portion. For the waistline, I'm dividing my waist measurement by 4, placing that, marking that point, adding 2 inches allowance and an extra 1.5 inches allowance. At the full length line, I divided my hip measurement by 4, marked it, added 2 inches allowance and an extra 1.5 inches allowance. Now I'm just going to go ahead and just connect all those points together. Now from that fold, I just marked 1.5 inches, and I'm repeating that all the way down, all the way from the top to the bottom, and then I'm just drawing a line to connect all those points. Now at the under bust and at the waistline, I'm just going in by 1/2 an inch, okay? This is what's going to give that snatched waist. So I'm just connecting those 2 points and then connecting that back down to the full length and back up, you know, to the top, okay? And I just went ahead to shade that portion, and then from that curve of the side piece, I'm just marking 3 inches, okay, from that point, and then I'm just extending that all the way down. Now if you don't want an extra panel, what I'm doing now is just to create an extra panel. If you don't want an extra panel, you don't have to do this. Now at the waistline, I'm just going in on both sides of that line by 1/2 an inch, so 1/2 an inch on both sides of that line I just drew. Now I'm connecting those 2 points, and then I'm connecting it back up, and I'm also connecting those points down as well. Again, this would give that snatched waist effect, okay? That's what's going to make the waist cinched. Now this is the first panel, second panel, third panel, and fourth panel. So when I open this up, I'm going to have 8 panels, right? Because this is on fold. I just went ahead and then I added an extra 1.5 inches allowance by the side, which is also optional. Now if you don't want up to 4 panels, you don't have to create up to 4 panels. Just stop at the number of panels that you want, okay? Now if you want a basque waistline, all you have to do is go up from that full length line by 1.5 inches and then just create a slanted line down. But I don't want a basque waistline, so I'm just going to ignore that line. I just showed you guys how to do that if you want a basque waistline for your Victorian corset. Now all the parts that I shaded, I'm going to cut them out, okay? So the parts that are shaded are going to be cut out, while, you know, the parts that are not shaded are actually what we're going to use, you know, to transfer on our fabric and lining and then, you know, use for our corset. So I'm just going to show you guys all the panels now. These are the first 4. When I unfold the center panel, this is what it looks like. And then placing the other panels, you're going to see the other panels now. These are the other panels. And I'm also going to label them the way I labeled, you know, the first ones. So this is panel 2, panel 3, and panel 4. As you can see, 2, 3, and 4 are mirror images of the first 2, 3, and 4. Okay. Now moving on to the back piece, I'm just my paper is also on fold. I just drew my baseline, and again I marked my bust points, under bust, waistline, full length line, and allowance. Okay, just like I did for the front. I'm also going ahead to extend all, you know, those lines. I'm cutting out the excess like I did in the front for the front piece as well. Now I'm just marking my zipper allowance 1.5 inches from the top all the way to the bottom. That's if you want to use a zipper. Okay, so I'm showing you guys how you're going to cut this if you want to use a zipper. But as you would see later on, I'm going to cut out this zipper allowance because I want to use loops for mine. Now from the top as well, I'm marking the armhole line, which is 9 inches. And then I also marked my shoulder divided by 2 and added 1.5 inches allowance. And I'm just drawing a line to connect, you know, that shoulder line point with the armhole line. And I'm also drawing the armhole curve as well. Now from that zipper allowance line, I just marked 4 inches all the way down, which is the nipple to nipple measurements divided by 2. Like I mentioned, the nipple to nipple measurement is 8 inches divided by 2. That will give us 4 inches. At the under bust and bust point line, I went in by 1 inch on both sides of that nipple to nipple line, and then I went ahead to connect both points. Now I connected those points with a straight line, and a diagonal line. I connected those points with a diagonal line to the bottom part of the paper, and I'm just curving out the back, just making that shape that I want. Now I'm dividing my bust measurement by 4, placing that at the bust point, marking that point, adding 2 inches allowance and an extra 1.5 inches allowance, just like I did for the front. I also did the same thing for the shape measurements, which I placed at the under bust, which that means I divided it by 2 obviously, and then I added 2 inches allowance and 1.5 inches allowance. At the waistline, I divided the waist measurement by 4, placed it on the waistline, added 2 inches allowance and an extra 1 inch allowance, just because you know, the dart there that I'm making up for is not as much, it's not as wide as the one at the under bust and the bust points. Now for the full length, I marked the hip measurements, divided by 2 and added 2 inches allowance and 1 inch allowance. Now I'm just cutting out the shape of my back piece, following the lines that I had just marked, rather. Now I'm just labeling the panels. The back piece has just 2 panels, 1 and 2, so you can see the panels labeled, and then I'm just cutting out the shaded you know, parts, just like I did for the front as well. I'm also cutting open the zipper allowance. So if you're using a zipper, just simply cut open that zipper allowance, and this is what the back panels look like. So you can see in total the back has 4 panels, while the front has 8 panels. So these are my front panels. I'm gonna need to cut them on my fabric. I'm using a doll face satin. Now I'm just simply going to pad 1, 2 and 3, the panels 1, 2 and 3, that's 4 of them. I'm just going to pad those center ones. The side pieces, I'm not going to pad them. So I'm just placing my breast pad. I made sure that I stopped the breast pad directly at the under bust. So just make sure to mark your under bust points. And I went ahead to just gum, you know, the breast pad using an iron. It's fusible, so I just went ahead to just iron it to stick it to the fabric. I'm just going to still mark, you know, the panel numbers because they could get confusing. Okay, so make sure you pad all the you mark all the panels even after you gum them. Now this is my lining. I also went ahead to just you know, cut them on my fabric. Now I'm just joining my back pieces. Very straightforward. Simply I'm just placing them right sides facing, and then I'm just joining them. And this is what they look like once I've, you know, joined, you know, both pieces together. Now taking the front pieces, I'm just going to join them according to their numbers. Okay, so that's why it's important that you know, write the numbers of each of the panels so you don't get confused. So I'm just joining number 1 and number 2. So the 2 center fronts, I'm just joining them together. And I'm also joining the opposite number 2 with the number 1. I hope this is not confusing, guys. Like I said, just follow the number. So number 1 is the one in the center. So I'm joining the number 2. You know, we have 2 number 2s, 2 number 2 panels. So I'm just joining the number 2s on both sides of the number 1. Okay, try not to get confused, guys. If this is confusing, all you have to do is lay all the panels flat according to their numbers, the way we arrange them at the beginning, and just go ahead and just pin them the way they are laid on the table. And then when you pin all of them, it's easier for you to know which one goes with which one, so you know which one to join with which one. Okay, so I just joined number 3 now to one side, and I'm joining the other number 3 to the other side. Okay, So now I'm joining the fourth panel, which is number 4. I'm joining it to one side, and then I'll also go ahead and join the other fourth panel to the other side. Okay, so it's 1 in the center, and then to the left is 2, 3, 4, and then again it's 1 in the center, and then to the right it's 2, 3, and 4. Okay, hope this is not confusing, guys. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section. Okay, I'll be very glad to answer whatever questions you guys might have. This is what it looks like. That's for the lining. I also went ahead to do the same thing for the fabric, and this is what they all look like. I went ahead to also open all the seams and press them flat. Now, taking the back pieces, I decided that I didn't want to use a zipper, and I decided I wanted to use loops for my back piece. So what I did was, from the bottom I marked 1 inch, at the center I marked 1.5 inches, and at the top I marked 2.5 inches. That's what will give it that V shape. So I'm just cutting that out. So that basically I'm cutting out the zipper allowance of the back. All right, so if you're going to use a zipper for your own Victorian corset, you don't have to cut this out. Just go ahead and use the pattern just the way it is. But if you want loops like mine, you can go ahead and cut out the zipper allowance just like I did. That was for the fabric, and this is for the lining. Now this is also my front piece for the lining. Now what I'm doing is I'm using my bias, and I'm just placing it on the seam line, and I'm going ahead to just sew the bias down. Now I'm doing this is going to create the boning channels where I'm going to insert my boning. I'm going to be using the plastic boning. Now I want the bonings to be inside so you don't see it, so it's like an inbuilt corset basically. So the bonings are inside so you wouldn't know where the bonings are attached. Okay, that's why I'm just sewing the boning channels inside. Now this is my plastic boning. I'm just going ahead to just cut the edges so it's not too sharp and pointy. Now I'm just going to follow the curve of the bust area. As you can see, my boning is also curved as well, so I'm just going to follow that curve to insert my boning. Okay, it's important you follow the curve when you're inserting your boning so that everything is nice and fitted when you're done. So I just went ahead to just insert the boning into that boning channel now, or boning casing rather. Now if you want your own boning to be visible in front, all you have to do is sew this boning casing right at the front, so right on the fabric and on the right side. Now I'm sewing this on my lining on the wrong side of my lining. Okay, so it's invisible at the end of the day. So I'm just going to go ahead and repeat this process for all the seams. I went ahead to just sew the boning casings on all the seams. This is what it looks like up close. So I went ahead to sew the boning casings on all the seams, and I also inserted my bonings into all the seams as well. For the back piece, I'm doing the same thing. I'm also placing the bias on that same line, and I'm just sewing it on both sides. Okay, and once I'm done with that, I'm also going to insert my boning. Now I decided to create an extra boning channel just close to the center back. It's important you do this so that that center back has structure. So I've gone ahead to insert the bonings in those two boning casings. I also went ahead to insert my loops. I have a detailed tutorial on how to insert corset loops and how to create them. The link will be in the description box down below. Okay, now remember that I had drafted I had shown you guys the yoke when I drafted the corset at the beginning. So if you want to you want yokes for your own Victorian corset, all you have to do is just take that yoke that I had shown you guys at the beginning and just cut out on your net or your lace or whatever you want to make your yoke with. So I just simply had done that, and I cut out my yoke with tulle. I used purple tulle, and I doubled the tulle because this is not the very expensive tulle, so I decided to double it so it doesn't rip. Now all I did was I sandwiched the tulle in between the fabric and the lining. This is the back piece, by the way, and then I sewed them together with the tulle in between the lining and the fabric, and then I opened it up, and then I'm just stop stitching, making sure that the allowance is facing the lining. Now I'm going ahead to just trim the bottom part of the line. I'm just taking out 1 inch from the bottom, so that, you know, when I join it with my fabric, the lining doesn't come out. Okay, so the lining stays put inside. So that's why I went ahead to just reduce the length of the lining. Now I'm sewing the lining and the fabric together. I'm also opening this up and stop stitching the allowance on the lining. Okay, so I made sure that I push all the allowance to the lining side and I sewed that down. And now I'm just going to go ahead and just close the sides. This is the side, and I'm also going to go ahead and close that center back. Now I have to leave a small channel where I'm going to use to turn this piece to the right side. Okay, so you can see everywhere is closed, so I went back in and then I tacked this point, left some space, and then I tacked another point, and then I just went ahead to just loosen the seam between those two tacked points. So once that seam is loosened, I can use that small space to just turn this piece you know, inside out, so that the right side is now outside. And this is it turned out, and you can see that the space there, so you can go ahead and just use a hemming gum to cover that part, or just sew it. Now same thing with my front piece. I'm just trimming the length of the lining, just taking out 1 inch at the bottom, and I'm taking my tool, placing it on that you know, neckline of the lining, and then I'm placing my fabric on top of it. So as you can see, the tool is sandwiched between the lining and the fabric, so the tool is in between the lining and the fabric. Now I'm just joining all those pieces together with 1/2 inch seam allowance. I started from the center to one end, and I'm starting from the center again to the other end. And now I'm just opening this up, making sure that the allowance is facing the lining side, and I'm going to go ahead and just, you know, top stitch that. You can decide to notch your allowance before you stop stitch. You can definitely do that. Turning this to the wrong side again, I'm just going to go ahead and just sew the bottom of the lining and the fabric together. And now I'm going to go ahead and just top stitch that as well, making sure that the allowance is facing the lining side. And now I'm going to go ahead and sew the sides closed. And now I also went ahead to just leave that space so that I can, you know, turn this to the right side. So I just left about 2 inches or so, and then I tacked on both ends, and then I just went ahead to just turn out the entire piece through that tiny hole. This is what it looks like. This is the hole. I'm also going to go ahead and just use a hemming gum to close it, or I'll just sew it down. So I just decided to just sew that closed. Now what you need to do is you need to go ahead and give this a very good press, so everything is nice and smooth and flat. Now I'm just taking my back piece and then I'm just going to just join it to the front piece at the shoulder. 1/2 inch seam allowance is what I left. I also did the same thing for the other back piece. I joined it to the front piece at the shoulder as well. And I'm going to just shaping the sides. Make sure that it's nice and fitted. It's a corset, it's supposed to be fitted, so make sure that you're shaping yours with your exact measurements, or you can even go a bit smaller so that you can get that real snatched look. That's basically it, guys. I'm going to show you guys what it looks like. This is what it looks like, guys, close up. I'm also going to show you guys a full look. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you in my next one.